Let's talk about Zoom because that stock is doing very well. To help us understand exactly where it is all headed, we invite into the stream Rishi Jaluria, DA Davidson analyst. He's joining us from San Francisco. And there's so many places we could start here, but one thing you point out is that the nature of work has irreversibly changed, and you expect that to have more upside for Zoom going forward. So I guess what you're saying is we don't go back to the pre-pandemic normal.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. Look, I think that's exactly it, right? Even in a post-pandemic, post-vaccine world, I think companies are going to be looking much more critically at business travel and saying, is it necessary to fly cross country for a 2-hour in-person meeting, or is that something that should be happening over Zoom, right? Should people have the flexibility to have remote work as an option and conferencing via Zoom? And I think because of that, this is not a flash in the pan. This is not a temporary benefit. This is a long-lasting benefit that Zoom will continue to ride the wave of for a long time to come.
Hey, Rishi, it's Brian Chung here. So I guess I wanted to ask in terms of, I guess, growth at this rapid pace. Very unusual for a company to see this, especially a tech company. So when you have revenue growing by 355% on an annualized basis in the fiscal second quarter, does that raise questions about the ability of Zoom to scale at that pace and make sure they actually have the capacity, if this is going to be sustained, to support this level of business?
Yeah, look, I think it's a great question, and look, this sort of growth rate I think is unprecedented, especially at this scale. The fact that they did more in revenue in this past quarter than they did in all of last year. This was already a hyper growth company at that point, but I think that is super important that they continue to invest aggressively, not just in products and technological innovation, but just the infrastructure to make sure that it works, right? Because that is the ultimate reason. I keep getting questions: why do people choose Zoom over other solutions? It's the scalability, it's the reliability, it's the ease of use. And if you lose any of that, Zoom's major competitive advantage goes away. And so you are seeing that. That was a lot of conversation of how they're really ramping up their spend with the hyperscale cloud providers as well as colo to make sure that you don't have downtime, because especially if everyone is using Zoom, not just for work, but kids are going online and taking their university classes, it is incredibly important that it continues to work. So that is something that I think Zoom cannot afford to slip up on.
What are some other areas that you think that Zoom can expand out to make sure this platform remains sticky? I mean, you talk about video conferencing, that's certainly been accelerated, but you look at some of the competitors like a Microsoft that has the collaborative software, that has the messaging element. I mean, do you see Zoom expanding into that pretty quickly?
Yeah, I don't actually see Zoom as going into real-time messaging, for example, or file storage. I think there's a very distinct approach to the collaboration market between what Microsoft is doing, which is try to do everything, and versus what you see Zoom and Slack and Dropbox, where they kind of team up and create a kind of best in breed experience, but allow you to choose your vendors versus trying to lock them in. Where I think the adjacent growth opportunities for Zoom are, I would call out to. And these are things you're already started on. One is the PBX, right? So instead of your phone system at work, replacing all your communications with Zoom, right? Because video is going to be the first way of communication. Everything is kind of ancillary to that. And they actually closed their largest ever Zoom phone deal in the quarter. And that was, it kind of slipped through the cracks because there was so much else impressive coming out of the quarter. The other is, I think, the verticalization of solutions, right? Because it's one thing to have a great video conferencing platform that's broadly applicable. But I think once you start to verticalize it, like they're doing in education, like they're starting to do with telemedicine, right, which is becoming really important in this environment, I think further and further verticalization of the solutions is going to be a really important growth driver to Zoom, because it makes it go from just being a video conferencing platform into a lot more.
But don't they face headwinds from competition that's going to force them to drop down the drivers of revenue? Whether they can grow in the ways you've described, they're going to have to compete with everyone else. I mean, FaceTime, you've got Google Meet, you've got our parent company owns Blue Jeans. It's coming their way.
Yeah, and that's where I go back to the advantages that Zoom has, as long as they can keep them up, are going to prove to be sustainable and durable, right? It's already becoming this de facto standard for video conferencing. There are obviously worries about Blue Jeans, after the Verizon deal happened, but that deal closed 3 months ago, and you and I are still using Google Hangouts, right? We're not using Blue Jeans in spite of that. I think free can only go so far. There's a reason that so many customers can get video conferencing for free from Microsoft Teams and still choose to pay money for Zoom, right? As long as the technology is better and reliable, and given that, how important video conferencing is, I don't, I'm not going to say I don't worry about competition, but I think the competitive case is a little bit overblown.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.